All right. Well, here we are. Now, gentlemen, welcome. Our ostensible topic here, what we had been set to discuss, was this: Southeast Asia's future. Will tech take all the jobs? I think Andrew has pretty well answered that question, and I imagine you all agree that the answer to that is no. Not all of the jobs, but certainly some of them. And we're probably going to see the outcomes play out differently by sector, by country, and then also perhaps by the level of the organization. And I'd like to now tease out with all of you some of the implications for different stakeholders. I'd like to look at leadership, I'd like to look at incumbents, I'd like to look at the individual worker, and then to follow some of the themes that Indranil introduced. So I guess I'll start there with leadership. What do you all think are the implications for leaders? What are the strategies that are going to be most effective? You know, this morning, Peter mentioned data-driven leadership and creativity and agility, all of which are fine things, but I'd like to see if we can dig a little bit deeper there and get into concrete aspects. So, Pierre, I know you and I talked about this a little bit earlier, and you have significant experience with large organizations and transformation. I know you have a perspective. What do you think is going to be required to navigate the road ahead?
Well, thanks, Jeffrey. It's definitely a nice day in Bangkok, so it's always great to be here. And we were asked to actually be controversial against each other and not agree on everything. And I must say that the prospect of me working for 90 years is surely not a hopeful message that I get from Indra, so it's not going to be my case for sure. But I must say that we have to demystify this fear about people losing jobs because of AI and technology. I certainly have anxiety about what the future is going to be in a positive way. As a retired pilot and someone that worked for many years in the aerospace industry, I feel like I'm flying a plane that has an engine that is going to fall apart any minute from now. But surely the machine is built in a way that it can land and take off just with one engine. But you have to be careful in which way you go as a way to surely understand where your path is and ensure that you land safety. But you know, clearly redundancies, casualties will be driven by technology. There is no doubt about that. But technology has also generated many more jobs. Martin Wolf, who's a chief financial writer for the Financial Times, last week wrote a beautiful article about productivity levels actually decreasing in North America and in the UK, despite the fact that technology has taken over in so many areas. And I do believe that it's more about conversion of jobs, as you said before, than jobs that are going to be disappearing. But everything that is admin-related, process control related is surely going to go away thanks to AI. And I take a positive view about that because people will feel liberated about the kind of quality jobs that they will have. And for sure, they will actually enjoy making their purpose real and driving their passion for innovation, strategic thinking, and so on. I don't know how many of you have seen Google Duplex. If you haven't, just go to YouTube and just see what that is, which is a fascinating tool that Google is now launching to connect physically through a telephone line with restaurants and any kind of service providers that allows, just to book restaurants and book a table in a very intelligent way. So I keep telling my secretary, this is not going to be your job in the future. And she surely feels scared about that. But on the other hand, the fact that she can, understand her job in a different way would surely make a big difference. But on the other hand, if you think about our jobs day to day, Accenture came with a study about a month ago that showed that in 1,000 companies, leadership or leaders spend 55% of their time doing control type of work and not necessarily anything that is related to strategy, people development, and innovation, which is about 5 to 10%. So in that prospect, clearly, we have to sort of see this as an opportunity for us to reinvent ourselves and look for more value and more innovation in the way we do business. And I feel excited about that for sure. Now, does that require a shift in technology? For sure. I think we'll have to definitely be the kind of companies that will embrace this technology. And as an example, in Unilever. We sort of work in the HR department where we want to keep the H and automate the R by putting a system in place that allows thousands of people to send their CVs through LinkedIn or Facebook, and then without any resume, by the way, no CVs are required anymore in our company, at least when you come out of college. And that's quite amazing because it allows the head of HR, instead of in a Friday afternoon screening CVs, trying to understand whether these people have emotional intelligence, creativity, right attitude, EQ, and so on. The system now allows to screen thousands of people through games which are psychometric games that allows them to understand the kind of creativity that they have, how they actually work in an environment where you're going to be yourself more than just telling where you come from. And that's going to be the future in my view. If they pass that stage, they go through a non-online interview, which is a video online interview, and allows us to understand what kind of abilities they have, the kind of attitudes to some specific questions. And that's quite revolutionary in my view. And we have seen fantastic results coming in our company through that.
Well, so it sounds like, from what you're saying, to tie this back to the idea of what is the implication for leadership, that one of the key roles of the leader, especially an incumbent, is going to be to help their workforce, to help their labor understand the opportunity and to see the possibility that is perhaps implicit in the threat. Mm-hmm. And I would agree with that, but I'd like to dig into how can we do that? How can the leader create space for that change to actually take place? Andre, I see you leaning forward, and I know I primed you to disagree and jump in. So what is your perspective here?
Well, I think the leaders just have to let go. I mean, the biggest problem we have, and that I'm seeing in manufacturing, is that we're, for example, in deploying machine learning tools within the workforce, is that we're trying to do it top-down. And if I look at the stat that you mentioned, 50% of all tasks can be automated, but only 5% of jobs. Those 50% of tasks represent billions of tasks. There is no way ever that any organization is going to identify those tasks and marry them with the worker. The person who needs to do that is the expert, is the person who does that job today. Right? And so if we go in and say, we have to automate those 50% of tasks and we're going to do it top-down, we are surely going to fail. So what we have to do instead is enable the worker. So we shouldn't augment them. Augment means we need to juice that person 10% more. We need to make him stand in the warehouse 10% longer. We need to give him the tools that they can use to create their own automation workflows. And in fact, we have those tools already. If you look at how easy it is to design a website these days, how easy is it to design a machine learning algorithm, I'll show that tomorrow, without a single line of code. We have the tools that can have untrained people design automation. Right? And that's, I think, something that we need to do. And there's no way the current management paradigm will allow that to happen because they insist on control. Right? Control is so important for them. They don't realize that in deploying these digital tools, they can actually have more control because there's control inherent in digital products. We can build it in. So my biggest message, and that one that I know is falling on deaf ears, even if there's people in this room that are nodding, is to let go. I think that's a really big opportunity that we'll have over the next 5 years.
I think that's an excellent insight, and I feel like now we've distilled perhaps a principle, and then you also introduced the concept of incorporating technologies into human systems where we can use enabling constraints to support the worker and hopefully promote some kind of transformation toward a better outcome. Now, John, I imagine you might have an additional take on principles for leadership in this new era. What do you think of the idea of Andre's mandate to let go, and what would you add to it?
Yeah, I guess in a somewhat cynical view, in private conversations with senior executives of companies around the world, when we get to a discussion of the future of work, the only topic on the table is how quickly can the machines take how many jobs and how many people can I eliminate to reduce costs. It's an efficiency mindset. It's all about cost reduction. And my belief is the key need for leaders is to think about the new capacity that becomes available if we can eliminate the routine tasks that are today being done actually by most workers. To be controversial, I would say virtually 100% of our work is at risk, because most of it is routine tasks that have been tightly specified, highly standardized, tightly integrated. Machines can do that so much better than human beings can. The opportunity is for us to take the capacity as those routine tasks get replaced by the machine and focus workers on creative problem solving and opportunity identification. And in that context, I think one of the key challenges and opportunities for leaders is to move from what I view today as the model of a strong leader. The model of a strong leader is someone who has all the answers. To whatever question you have, you can count on the leader to have the answer. My belief is the strong leaders of the future will be those who have the most powerful questions and who will say, I don't know. But if we could come up with an answer to this question, we could accomplish amazing things. It cultivates a questioning kind of culture, where today, if you ask a question, it's a sign of weakness. Wait a minute, you don't know the answer? Go back to your books. No, in this new world, it's all about the questions. And it starts at the level of the leader. If the leaders aren't asking questions, nobody else feels comfortable asking questions. And so I think that's the big opportunity.
I love this, and I particularly am fond of the idea of the organizational leader or the CEO as kind of the questioner in chief, right? And hopefully creating a space for exploration and discovery. And Indranil, you introduced the theme early on of unlocking the human potential of the organization. And I'm wondering, is this something that resonates with you? Do you feel like trying to create a culture of continuous learning and discovery is essential to that? And if so, how do we do that?
So I take a cynical view on this. I'll tell you why.
Fabulous. I'm glad to have you up here.
I'll tell you why. Because I completely agree, by the way, that everything that you said should be done, right? Letting go. With a lot of the leaders that I work with, even the ones who are really, really well-minded, I'm not talking about people who are, cynical or anything like that. Very, very conscientious leaders. They find letting go to go against their grain and their identity of who they are. Mm-hmm. So even when, to John's point, and I completely agree with you, that the question should be asking the tough questions. Mm-hmm. Very often I find leaders being uncomfortable when the question on the table is something that they don't have any clue about. To even say that, okay, so the questions that I am going to be asking needs to make me look good. So I'm the smartest one asking the smartest questions. I get a lot of that. I coach a lot of senior leaders. But that is because of the way we have really built the persona of a strong leader over several decades. And I think we are all talking about breaking it down, but we are not saying how can leaders who have their own egos and their own kind of mindsets, what can they aspire to becoming that will make their identity whole again? So I think what I find interesting is that when I work with startup entrepreneurs and venture capitalists, they seem to get into that persona much more faster than I see when I'm working with leaders of large organizations. And perhaps the one thing that I find in startup entrepreneurs and venture capitalists is, and this is my cynical take on it, is that everybody has a fear of failure. But we often, in large organizations, we penalize people for failing when they take an action, and we do not penalize people for inaction, or at least it comes too late in the game, right? But in the VC environment, if you are the guy or girl who has missed the Facebook opportunity, and you didn't act on it at the right time, your career is completely ruined. So my cynical take on it is increase the fear of failure on those types of errors. And that's when leaders will find their identity around being able to say, if I don't spot something, if I create inaction within my organization, if I don't ask the right questions, then my career could be ruined for life.
I think this also gets back to the recurrent theme we've had today about the importance of experimentation, right? And ideally being able to de-risk experimentation and to learn faster. And I'd be particularly curious to hear from both Pierluigi and Andre here at organizations of drastically different sizes, how you all think about enabling experimentation within Unilever and at Authentize. Andre?
Yeah, so first of all, on John's comment before about leaders only looking for automation as a way to take jobs out of the company, we must face the reality of an industry, at least ours, that is under massive disruption. So cost of overheads, delayering the organization, simplifying the ways of working is absolutely critical for the company itself to survive. So we do need to actually look for efficiencies on one side, but we also need to embrace technology in a way that we can build social enterprise tools so we can connect at all levels in the company and empower people to actually be themselves. And to your point about leadership, I think in today's companies, those who get it to the top are being always appraised by the results and the background that they have and the experience. I think more and more companies are actually assessing how people are self-aware of their development needs, their purpose in life, what they stand for, what their passion is, what they want to achieve in a bigger mission than themselves. And that is what inspires the organization to follow them. And I think that's kind of attributes the leadership of today is more and more relevant. And even in companies like multinationals where I belong to, you look for those kind of people. And those are the ones that embrace technology. Now, to your question about how do we allow experimentation, every time we do it internally, we fail. Because clearly, the rate of failure in a big company that is measuring you on results doesn't necessarily reward you for failure. I have to be honest about that. Of course, we're trying to learn, and we keep saying, fail fast and learn fast and that kind of stuff, but that's more from the mouth out than from a real belief, in my view. So what we do is that we acquire companies, we leave them independent, we sort of have them in the business model that we have acquired in a way that we can send our people there instead of sending their people to us. We have created a startup hub in Singapore, supported by the Singapore government, that actually has on our same floor 69 startups today in an ecosystem that is supported by Deloitte, Microsoft, Syngenta, and other multinationals, WPP for advertising, so they can actually create experimentation, innovation, new business models without necessarily working only for us. And we try through them to embed the culture of innovation, experimentation. We offer a market for them, which is the thing that they need the most, more than just capital. And I think through that, we get to experiment and innovate ourselves in the long term.
I would just want to harp on to this point. I think we will not get to experimentation as long as we see workers as kind of a unit of labor, right? As long as they're a unit of labor, as long as we're calling them workers. I mean, the term workers encapsulates that. I think we're not going to get to experiment because we just see them as executing a command. Having said that, I agree with you. I don't think that this whole culture of failure is okay actually even exists in the Valley. It doesn't, right? Failure sucks. I mean, it's unavoidable. It's not a great, pleasurable experience. And so what we do at Authentize is I read it was really impactful for me, the summary of a book. I shouldn't say I read the book, by Reid Hoffman, The Alliance. And he talks about some of the same concepts that you talked about today, which are define a mission statement that you and the worker share. Right? What are you going to do for the employee? What are you going to do for the person that's working with you? And what are they going to do for you within the next 18 months? And so you may or may not succeed in that mission, but it's a time-bound mission, right? And so whether or not you succeed doesn't matter because you both know that there's an end to this period. And after that, if you're not capable of defining a new mission statement that both benefits both you and the person working for you, then the person leaves. Almost automatically. I mean, it just happens I've never found that our inability to define a new statement meant the person would stay. That never happened. So I think creating these, deciding that failure is okay, I think is is against the grain of how we operate and how we've been conditioned for the last hundreds of years. But creating environments where some failure is okay, some failure is not, but doing it in a time-bound mission, I think that is maybe the most successful that we can follow, paradigm we can follow.
John, do you have anything to add on this? Or I have a follow-on question if you don't, but I imagine you probably do.
No. I think we did an interesting case study. There's a company called Intuit in the financial services software industry. And one of the interesting things about the company is the founder basically in every part of the organization designed and deployed what he called experimentation platforms, which were environments that invited workers to test out new approaches in an environment that managed the risk. And it was a very powerful message to the workforce that basically experimentation is essential. And we want to help you manage the risk to overcome the risk averseness that many workers have. So I think it's a very powerful way to draw out that experimentation and manage the risk of failure.
It's interesting to me to have a collection of individuals sit up in front of any room full of business people and talk about what has worked and what might be scalable and what might be broadly applicable. And that brings me around to the subject of organizational design. And this is something we haven't really talked about a whole lot on the program yet today. But I think we're kind of nipping at pieces of it. Are there certain platforms, are there models that can enable or create systems that are conducive to a certain culture or an emergent property that we want to see in the organization? And I'm curious, do any of you see that there is actually a trend in organizational design and structure that is going to be most conducive to adaptability and agility going forward? And if so, how would you encapsulate that? Andrew, no, please.
Yeah. So this is almost all of the work that we're doing has some elements of that question. Because the organizations, frankly, I mean, most organizations in the world are just designed wrong for the future of work. Let's just face that. So different themes have come in, especially around agility, agile teams, team-based organizations, network-based teams, self-organizing teams, and the question of building a scalable architecture that allows you to have these teams working in a mesh together, but do it at scale, do it at 100,000 employees, 200,000 employees, and so on and so forth. There are some good examples of people who are making progress on that, but it is very, very hard because of various reasons. So I know I just want to add maybe just one thing to that whole fabric around organization design, is the notion that as we get into this kind of network-based teams kind of approach, we need a different way of thinking about rules and the rules that bind an organization together. And one of the biggest worries that I have is that when we talk about self-directed teams and network-based teams, there is some literature, not all, that suggests that we should take rules away. That we should create a completely democratized system where you trust that everybody will show up, do the right thing, and create value for the organization. And in my experience, what I'm beginning to realize is you actually need another set of rules, not the same rules that we work with today, the functional kind of hierarchies, but you need a different set of rules for thousands of network-based teams to work together in a coordinated fashion and to create value in a coordinated fashion. What I'm beginning to see is a body of work coming together that is beginning to set those rules in play. And when we have that, I mean, to use Amin's term, an operating system, if you like, of a set of rules, or a set of rules of engagement of how teams work together, and that is well agreed in a set of organizations, I think we'll have an exponential rise in the efficiency and effectiveness with which organizations can do the work. We are not there today. In my opinion, we're a few years away from having that common protocol, if you like, of how this works.
Maybe even a few years away from being a few years away.
Probably.
But we'll see. Pierre-Luigi?
Yeah, so here's my first disagreement with Indra. We're friends, so I can say that. So I frankly believe, and we say this in our company, that rules are for fools. And in a way, it's like, again, your question in the previous session, how many of you have read the instruction manual of a phone? No one does that today. So I think that it's important to align people behind common goals, align people behind the principle of complementarity of skills, and not necessarily defining, which is possibly not what you're saying, a set of rules which will end up becoming the Bible in which how the organization works today.
Right.
Because that definitely is not, in a big system, dynamic enough for the organization to adapt. You know, I remember 20 years ago when I started working here in Thailand, precisely in this hotel, you know, I remember a big multinational company having in every department a Christmas tree made out of infinite layers, like 15, 16 layers of people represented with pictures on the wall, which has moved from that moment into what many companies, and we're a victim of that at Unilever, becoming a matrix organization that has all kinds of ambiguity, chaos, lack of understanding of who's supposed to do what, double, triple hatting, which is not necessarily easy to manage. And then I can stop seeing the day when we're going to be aligned through networks of people who are on one side leading a program, and on the other side being the frontliners who are basically doing the operational work. And then you have the integrators in the middle who are either running jobs or liaising with the outside world, freelancers, crowdsourcing, partnerships. It's going to be much more dynamic. And the definition of rules in that space, in my view, is too static for us to keep up with the pace of change. So it becomes a challenge because clearly you need to be adaptable, exposed as a leader. You cannot have all the answers, as we said before. We need to be clever in asking the right questions. But it is a much more exciting environment where people come to work in an agile way to do their best with the quest of one single purpose, individually and as a team, and one single mission or goal, which is to win in the marketplace. And that's the kind of direction that we're going today.
John?
Yeah, I was just going to comment. I think that in addition to how you organize, as thinking about it in terms of structure, is to think about a set of practices that will help everyone to learn faster in the organization. And in that context, we've done a lot of work around the practices. One practice that's a bit counterintuitive in the context of a mindset that really focuses on efficiency and speed, where friction is bad. You don't want friction. It slows you down. We actually believe one of the key practices that needs to be cultivated is what we call productive friction, where actually you create a culture that invites everyone to challenge each other, but to do it with respect in the interest of getting to a better and better answer. And that's a very different culture from most of the organizations that we have today, where you want everybody to be in alignment and agreement on what needs to be done and just execute. No, productive friction is key to learning. And that's, I think, an interesting practice to cultivate.
I think it is as well, and I also think as we're winding down our time with the panel, that we've set up nicely for 2 sessions that we'll have tomorrow, where we'll have Andre back on stage and also John Hagel, and we will be exploring further the concepts of agility and then also attempting to learn at scale. So, gentlemen, thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to have you up here. Ladies and gentlemen, please, another round for my panel.